Miami Dolphins are in a very tough situation because after the Tua concussion injury, there have been many questions brought up surrounding this Miami Dolphins team. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Tua injury as well as what the future might look like for the Miami Dolphins. Well, I did not think I was going to be making this video this early into the season, but unfortunately after Thursday night's game, we got to talk about Tua Tagovailoa, what his future looks like, and what this Dolphins team future looks like as well. Now before we actually hop into the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. But without further ado, let's hop into the video. So I think the best way to start off this video is by simply talking about the Tua injury and what this means for Tua himself, because I think that's probably the best way to go about this. When it comes down to it, point blank simple, I don't think there's anybody on earth who ever wishes an injury like this upon somebody who, by all accounts, is a very good person. So for Tua Tagovailoa, I'm very saddened to see that he's had another concussion injury, and I'm very sad that this is going to happen this early into the season because it did look like he was going to have a pretty good year. Concussions are unfortunately a big part of the game. They're something that are essentially unavoidable, especially from a position like the quarterback where your head is very vulnerable. It just is very saddening to see somebody like the character of Tua who has gotten multiple concussions, and not just little dinks on the head or anything sort of small. These are massive concussions that could have long-term issues for the guy. So for Tua and so for his family, I feel very bad about the situation, but this sort of had me thinking, what is actually going to happen with this team? Because there's a lot of question marks surrounding this injury and what it could potentially mean for both Tua and for the Miami Dolphins. So in terms of for Tua, I think there's really two possibilities this goes down here. Either you retire now or at the end of the year, or you continue playing. If I had to guess, I would assume that he's going to come back in 2 or 3 weeks and finish the season out and then maybe reconsider retirement at that point. But I also have no idea what's going on in his mind and of course in his family's mind. So I would not be shocked whatsoever if it comes out today or tomorrow or whenever that Tua is going to retire. Again, if I had to guess, I would imagine that he's going to play the rest of the season just because you put in all that work in the offseason. You would imagine that there is a possibility that he might want to finish the season out with his team and with his guys, not to mention he probably just wants to do it because he loves the sport. But when you are thinking about the long-term implications of his life and his health, it might not be a good thing to go out on that field and risk another head injury, and who knows, one more head injury and this could be a whole other conversation we're having. So for the case of Tua, if he were to retire, it's not like he has any sort of money incentives to keep playing. He will be paid very nicely. So if he were to retire, I just looked up how much he would actually be receiving. So of course he signed a 4-year $212 million contract with $132 million of it being fully guaranteed. And this is based off of Yahoo Sports. If he were to retire, if his retirement is deemed injury related, the Miami Dolphins would owe him around $167 million. That is of course pre-taxes. But ultimately, if it is not classified as injury related, which I don't understand how that could ever happen, it would probably be injury related. But if it was for another reason, the Dolphins would actually only owe Tua $90 million with his additional $42 million signing bonus. Again, I would imagine that this is going to be an injury-related retirement. So if that's the case, Miami's going to have to owe him basically all of the guaranteed money plus some more. And for a guy like Tua, who also has sponsorships and so many other things going for him, money really should not be the deciding factor of whether or not he keeps playing or whether or not he retires. And for the case of the Miami Dolphins, this is a scenario that's sort of out of their hands. They don't really have a say in whether or not he does retire because ultimately speaking, you want to do the best for your player and you want to do the best for one of your favorite guys. So if he were to retire, I don't think they're going to tell him no. So this also had me thinking, what could the Miami Dolphins do if Tua were to hypothetically retire right now? Well, I looked up all the free agent quarterbacks, and unfortunately, there's not very many good quarterbacks out there, but there are a couple names that I think could be brought up as potential alternatives if somebody like Tua were to retire. The number one name that everyone is kind of throwing out there is Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, he has a past with the Miami Dolphins, playing with them for many years. And while he was never a great quarterback for Miami, he did have some success later on in his career, especially with the Tennessee Titans. Of course, it hasn't really ended well, and lately he's been on free agency and hasn't been able to get a new contract. But for a team like Miami, who is in need of a starting quarterback, I definitely do think Ryan Tannehill could be a legitimate possibility. Somebody who could come in, play the system at a high level, and still give this team a fighting chance to make the playoffs. Some other names out there are guys like Trevor Siemian, Kellen Mond, Nate Sudfeld. A guy I really do like here is PJ Walker. I think he'd be a good fit for this team. But a name I do want to throw out here, and he's not on free agency, but he is on a practice squad, is Desmond Ridder. I'll say this, I don't think Ridder would be a great fit for this system because he doesn't have a very strong arm, but neither does somebody like Tua, so I think it could be a bit of a good fit here. Now, like I said, he is on a practice squad, so you'd have to find a way to get him, but it's not like it's going to cost you much. Hell, the Arizona Cardinals dropped him a few weeks ago. But for somebody who used to be a starting quarterback just 2 years ago, I definitely think this could be a legitimate shot for a team like Miami to get a starting quality level quarterback. Obviously, Desmond isn't a great quarterback, but he was somebody who led a Atlanta Falcons team to multiple wins, and if you put him on a Dolphins team that is filled with talent, I could definitely see a world where that actually does work out. Another name that's going to be tossed around by a lot of different fans is, of course, Trey Lance. He's somebody who really hasn't gotten a chance in the NFL. He still has a very high ceiling, but also has a very low floor. With Dallas in the preseason, he hasn't looked all that good, but he also had a couple shining moments. So if you were to put him on a team like Miami, I think there could be some good things from there. He does have a strong arm. He's also very athletic. The only thing for him that he struggles with is decision making. So if he can understand that, have decent footwork in the pocket, I could see it actually being a decent long-term alternative if Tua were to retire. But in terms of some potential long-term options if Tua were to retire, which at this point I would probably say he's going to retire within the next year or so, some long-term alternatives that you can definitely look at is, of course, looking at next year's draft. Unfortunately, next year's draft isn't loaded with too many good high-quality quarterbacks. You do have some guys like Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck. You could even throw some names out there like Cam Ward and Jalen Milroe, who might be able to climb up draft boards just because of their pure athleticism. Of all those quarterbacks that I named, I think the best one would probably be Quinn Ewers because he kind of plays in a similar system that Mike McDaniel runs. McDaniel runs a system that is very quarterback friendly. It's easy reads, not very too much complex throws, a lot of routes down the middle, stuff that Quinn Ewers runs a lot with Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. I also think that he is a very similar quarterback in a lot of ways to Tua, except he actually has a monster arm that can actually throw rocket launchers to Tyreek Hill. I look at a guy like Carson Beck, and I don't think he's that good of a fit. He reminds me a little bit of like a Jared Goff type of quarterback, and I don't think Goff would be a good fit for Miami. And I like the idea of Shedeur in this offense too, but I would prefer somebody like Quinn, even though I do think there's a chance that Quinn goes higher than Shedeur. Either way, I think both those quarterbacks would be really solid fits for Miami. When you look at the potential free agents this team could bring in the offseason, you're looking at names like Russell Wilson and nobody really else of quality. There would have been Dak Prescott, but of course he signed that massive contract, so that's not going to happen. And maybe somebody like Will Levis could get replaced this offseason. I don't think it will happen, but there's always the chance. If that's the case, I think Miami should go all in for Will Levis because I think he's a great fit. Another name I'll throw out is Sam Howell of the Seattle Seahawks. I know he just got traded this offseason, but I think he'd be actually a very solid fit for Miami. Of course, if I were to pick between a rookie quarterback or Sam Howell, I'm probably going to take the rookie quarterback. But I at least wanted to bring up the name because I think there's something there that could be kind of special. If you want to move past next year's draft, let's say you want to just have a bit of a bridge quarterback situation where maybe Tua comes in, plays the rest of the year, retires, and then next year you have a bridge gap quarterback situation, you could potentially be looking at 2026 draft class and find some younger players there. In terms of some names that could potentially come from the 2026 draft class, you're looking at a bunch of guys who are playing their first year or are still backups, but there are a couple names that I think are very notable here. Of course, you have some guys like Lenore Sellers from South Carolina who thus far has looked pretty good. I wouldn't, again, say that he's going to be somebody who's going to be a first-round pick. Again, we're highly projecting here. Some other names out there are potential guys like Arch Manning from Texas, Dante Moore from Oregon, and I'm going to butcher this name, but the Tennessee starting quarterback Nico Iamaleava. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say his last name. And there should also be a numerous other amount of quarterbacks that are going to play really good the rest of the year and potentially be super high drafted quarterbacks in 2026. I didn't say Dylan Raiola either. He might be somebody who comes out early. So those are a couple names. Again, there's nothing really to connect those quarterbacks with the Miami Dolphins. I just thought I'd throw those names out there because those are talented quarterbacks that potentially Miami could be looking at in their long-term future. So in terms of what I actually think is going to happen, again, I think Tua is going to come back at some point this year. I would be a little bit shocked if he were to retire right now. I say a little bit shocked, but I wouldn't be terribly shocked. It definitely could happen. Ultimately, I think Tua will play the rest of the year, then likely retire in the offseason, and then I think Miami has two options. They can either go in on a young quarterback who's already in the league, maybe a Trey Lance, a Will Levis, somebody along those lines. Hell, maybe even Bryce Young at this point. If not that, maybe they go out there and draft somebody like Quinn Ewers, who I think would be a fantastic fit. Or potentially they could just be looking for a stopgap, a one-year rental before they try to look for somebody in a potentially more talented draft class in 2026. I think those are all legitimate possibilities for this Miami Dolphins team. It's very unfortunate that we're even having to have this conversation the same year that Tua just signed a 4-year deal. But ultimately speaking, this was a very devastating injury. Unfortunately, a lot of us saw us live, and it was just really hard to watch and really hard to look at. And I think everything that's been going on with this Dolphins team has been very positive up to this point until now, where unfortunately we have to make these type of videos and it just sucks to make. But ultimately, you guys tell me in the comment section below, what do you guys think this Dolphins team is going to do? Are they going to potentially keep Tua Tagovailoa? Is he going to retire? Or should they go ahead and start looking at some draft boards in 2025, 2026 to see if they can get their franchise quarterback? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.